you ever wanted to play Zelda Breath of the Wild but thought to yourself, you know what would make this game so much better? If you yeet out Link and replace him with Mario. Well, then I have great news for you. Hi, my name is Arevya and I am a disabled and chronically ill content creator, and today I will be reviewing the accessibility of the new indie game Tchia. Tchia is a beautiful, physics-driven, open-world game inspired by New Caledonia, a tiny island in the Pacific Ocean. This game is like the love child between Zelda's Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, set in a stunning tropical environment. This game is developed by the studio Awaceb and published by Keplet, and are available at release dates for PlayStation 4 and 5 and on PC. And this is the game that lets you do it all. Climb the mountains, swim in the ocean and sail around different islands. Customize yourself and your boat with over hundreds of different items, but most important, you can soul jump. Similar to how you can use Cappy in Mario, in Tchia you can soul jump and take control over 30 playable animals and a lot of objects, all with different abilities. Like dogs and pig that can dig, dolphins and turtles that can speed swim, and pigeons that can fly and poop. But this game is not only beautiful for the eye, it also has a soul-warming story that will play on your heartstring, as this game made me cry not once, nor twice, but full of bawling my eyes out 3 times. It is obvious that the co-founder of the studio behind Tchia has a love for their homeland, and there is where the inspiration is taken when it comes to the landscape, culture, music, folklore, traditions and language. The language and subtitles. And language is where I want to start my accessibility review of this game. Because as a whole, I would say that Tchia is an accessible game for a lot of people, and I do get the feeling that the devs have tried to not only give us accessible options, but to also think about making accessible design and gameplay from an early stage. But I do think that the biggest hinder for a lot of people can be the limiting audio language setting in the game. Because in Tchia, there is no way for you to set the spoken language of the characters in the game. They will speak in 2 languages that we found in New Caledonia, Drehu or French. This means that there's no way for you to get the game audio in English, but don't worry, the game setting, HUD, information and subtitles come in a plethora of different languages, English included. In other words, I think this will be one of the biggest reasons why this game will be less accessible for some people. Asking for the gamer to read everything that happens in a game can be a big hurdle, especially for gamers with low vision or are blind, or those of us who have a hard time processing only written text. To some degree, I can understand the studio's decision, as the devs make it clearly from the start of the game that this is the love letter to their homeland and culture. They do try to meet us gamers at the middle and make the game accessibility to giving us option to getting subtitles and info in a lot of different languages. They have, in other words, a strong artistical view of what they want the game to be, but are willing to work around it to help as many as they can, and I do respect that. But with such a big part of the user base, us gamers, being dependent on subtitles to understand what is happening in the game, I do wish that they had gone one step further and giving us options to have subtitles and cutscenes that we could click through ourselves. Due to the speed some of the characters talks in, the text can sometimes go too fast to read for someone like me that has dyslexia. But this would also affect others that can struggle to comprehend quick text, or just, to be honest, somebody that got distracted for a second or two due to life. If the game had subtitles where you can toggle on and off if you want the subtitles to progress automatically or by you pressing a button, it would be inclusive to more gamers. Though this can be hard to add now that the game is done, as options like this often require you to make the flow of the cutscenes a bit different to have a more natural stopping point in a conversation between the characters. But the game has something really cool, and that is a massive journaling system, which make me think that if the devs want to take the accessibility one step further, they could add some new tabs here where you can go back and look at the text from your last cutscene and or conversation with any character with a story plot. Sort of a transcription of what has happened in the game. Journal. Which brings me to my second accessibility point, the journal system, which is where I feel the game does a lot of correct things. Because this game has one of the more extensive journal systems I have ever seen. In there you get information about story, characters, items and abilities, activities, landmarks, fauna and flora. Which for me is a game changer, as I am dependent on needing to look things up, as I easily can forget things. I normally have to do this by just Googling, but I do prefer when games have the information available for me in the game. In the story tab, you have This Has Happened So Far section, which is split into different chapters of the game. I know it might not feel like a big deal, but I often find that I need things like this, especially if I come back to a game after a really long break. Because this brain doesn't like to brain sometimes. And cognitive difficulty or not, I do know I'm not the only gamer that can experience being lost in a story after a long break. Under the item and ability and fauna tab, we get more explanation about how to use the different item, and it tells you the extra abilities you can use when you soul jump into an animal, like the chicken's ability to spawn explosive eggs, the powerful pinch that the common crab has, and yes, believe me, this does make sense when you play the game. By the way, you can pet all the animals in the game. Setting menu. But the journal system is not the only thing we find in the menu. We also have the general menu where you find all the different settings. And the setting menu will be available to you before the game starts, which please, can more games do this? A big pet peeve of mine is when game just jumps straight into the action without me being able to check the settings first. Because if that happens and the game not have things like subtitles on, there is a big chance that I will miss some information. So the game having a start menu before it actually game starts is a huge plus for me. And the menu can also be accessed at any time by pressing the pause menu. And when I say anytime, I mean any time. That can be whenever in the game, mid cutscene, in a fight, the pause menu is always accessible for you. And these things might seem like small quality of life settings, but for someone like me that gets sudden pain and need to take a lot of breaks, this makes me feel more comfortable playing the game on days I'm not feeling so well. The rest of the settings are more or less the standard you find in any game, but also some cheeky accessibility and quality of life settings we will take a look at now. But first, a little small grain of critique. The menu do have explanation for what every settings in the menu do, which is nice and something I really appreciate when games do. But sadly, the devs have done the cardinal sin when it comes to accessibility, and that is that they have put really small grayish text on a semi-transparent background. Oof. I have okay eyesight for my age, I just need some mere -1 contact lenses and I can see OK+. But even I had trouble reading some of the explanations under the setting. Is there a setting called more legible fonts that I hoped would make the text show up better, but it only made the font more readable, not actually fix the problem of grey text on light colored background. This should, however, be an easy fix for the devs with a little patch, so I really hope they will do so. And at least the game had the ability to change the font size of the subtitles, and I found myself playing most of the game at a 48 font size, which is the biggest you can get, just because it was so crucial for me to be able to read what was happening to understand the story. So 2 thumbs up for accessible subtitle sizing, but I do hope the devs will patch in sizing for the UI and the HUD as well, as the text describing the items in the overworld and your list of quests that can sometimes be a bit hard to see. When it comes to the audio, it's nice to see that the game has split up the sound in a lot of different sliders, so if you are like me and you do not like the sound of footsteps, you can just turn that down a bit. It is also worth noticing that there will be a couple of explosions during the game, but there is none of that stereotypical ringing in the ear when this happens, and thank God for that, because things like that can so easily trigger tinnitus and other auditory problems. Over to the video menu. There is nothing there other than the standard we find in most games, but one thing to point out is that there is no way of you to put on any safe mode for flashing lights. I only came over one scene in the game where something flashed, and it was nothing more than 2 seconds, but I have not 100%ed the game, just completed the story. And I do not have epilepsy or any other illness that can be triggered by flashing lights, so I do not know if 2 seconds is enough for a seizure or illness to get triggered, but it is a good FYI. The more you know, and stay safe. One thing that this game has that I have not seen that often is actually something called family mode. As the game itself says, even though the game is cartoony and never overly graphic, this option reduced intensity of some specific scenes, and it absolutely did. The game is supposed to be cozy and heartwarming and all that jazz, but it does talk about real life topics, which do include some scenes of blood and death. In normal mode, the game shows these scenes quite straightforward, but in family mode you see no blood, not so much of little funny gore, and when it gets a bit more violent, shows up as a cartoon drawing instead of showing it animated out. The menu also includes the standard but still really important key remapping that is divided into 2 sections, one for keyboard binding and other for gamepad binding. Most of my gameplay was played by using controller, as this was what the devs actually recommended. It seemed like the game recognized most controllers, as I was able to play it with a standard Xbox controller, the Xbox Adaptive controller and my PS5 controller. I did also try my Switch Pro controller, but sadly it only recognized half of the controller, though I fear this is a problem on my side, as this controller is old and have shown sign of bugging up before. A really good thing was that the game recognized the controller even if it was plugged in before the game started. This game is though button heavy, and when it comes to using the controller, it required the use of both of your analog sticks and smashing 16 buttons. In other words, I use every single button on my Xbox controller except for this little dude here. And on the keyboard, this is even more, as it needs you to use your whole mouse plus 21 buttons. I do think though that it would be possible to get this number lower, as some of the buttons are only used in specific settings like in the menu or a minigame. And for all my motion sick and seasick besties out there, do not worry, the game has given us a toggle to turn off both motion blur and screen shaking just for you. But do keep in mind that this game is all about just exploring the world by jumping, swimming, boating and gliding wherever you want, so if that is not something for you, even in third-person gameplay, this might not be the game for you. Other notable settings is the aim and throw assist that helps auto-adjust projectile towards target, making it easier to hit. This seemed for me to work great for actual enemies, but not so often when you're trying to aim at an animal or do some of the slingshot minigames. Minigames. And talking about minigames, this game has mini-games, and it's so much fun and accessible. From cozy rhythm games to pressure-inducing stone stacking, the minigames is a fun little break in your exploring. And if you want 100% the game, you need to find and do them all. Big part of the game is the ambience, and is nicely conveyed through all the different minigames that includes music. They are your typical rhythm game, sort of a quick time event where you are supposed to press the button to the rhythm of the song, but don't you worry, if this is not something you are comfortable with doing, you can always push a button and the game goes to auto mode. So now you can sit back and relax, which is something I found myself doing actually for most of the time. Since the game relays part of the story through the song in a language I do not know, this was a good way to just feel the vibe and read the lyrics as it was translated. And we do love when a game lets us jump over quick time events, as they can be a hard stop between somebody being able to play the game or not. As not everybody are able to do quick button sequences, either due to cognitive problems or mobility problems. So letting us opt out of something like this is a big win for accessibility. But if you want to get this little pop-up to 100%, you will need to actually play the minigames. If not, it would just show 0%. One weird thing I came over with the rhythm minigames though was that halfway through the game it stopped showing me the hints on how to play, which made me at one point play through half of the song without actually playing anything, because I had forgotten that you needed to press a button on the rhythm, not just use your analog stick. To be honest, I do not know if this is an oversight from the devs, that it was supposed to be telling you how to play, or that they just thought that it would be known by now and I just have skill issues. Who knows? Other minigames include Slingshot, Range Challenge, God, that is a tongue twist, Race Challenge, Rock Balancing and Totem Sculpting. All of which had its own mechanics, but none of them have automod as in the rhythm games. Luckily, there was a tips on how to control every minigame on the screen. And don't worry, if you ever get stuck, there is a way of skip game sequence, which is brilliant if you ever get stuck on a minigame, so you don't need to rely on others for help to complete the game if you don't want to. Of course, that also means that you cannot soft lock yourself in a game or in any of the minigames due to accessibility problems. You can always skip either cutscenes or gameplay. Gameplay. This game is in all its glory a really cozy and fun adventure. Like, look at this. Link could never. And the horse in Skyrim would be proud. I do like how the devs have set up the game with a playable intro that shows you how to play the game through the story. I have to say that I prefer this, as games who has long intros that drags on before you can jump into any action is a big pet peeve of mine. Everything you learn in the intro is of course easily accessed in the journal system, as talked about before. Plus, when you learn something new, they give you this handy pop-up with good explanation of what you just learned. I found myself often just running around in a game, soul jumping into random things and just trying to do whatever I want for pure shits and giggles. I had a blast most of the time, but I sadly found myself, or rather the lack of. Because the game does have quite pretty and well drawn map, but they have decided that you will not be marked on the map. And when you push the Where Am I button, you only get the general area where you are and not the precise point marked with a red dot. So here you need to use the good old style of using location around you to navigate yourself to where you are on the map. Which did put me in a rough space more than once when I got completely turned around and had no idea how to find out how to get to my next quest. There is though a way for you to be 100% sure where you are, and that is to interact with a sign pole, which will mark you on the map. Luckily, they have also done it so that the campfires beams up in the sky, so my plan every time I got lost was just to look for the beam and hope for the best. You also get a compass not so far out in the game that you can keep on the screen while playing, which is what I did for most parts. It didn't make me show up on the map, but I could just make a pin and follow the compass until I reached that or my next quest. Two things though that I really liked is the fact that it pops up an icon on the screen when you get close to anything that you can interact with. The other thing is that the list that is up on your screen telling you what quest is up next. This can also be easily accessed in the journal, something that is quite helpful for me. I did talk about earlier how you need to use a lot of buttons in this game, but I have to say, as someone with chronic pain in my hands due to rheumatism arthritis, this game did not trigger any more pain than gaming itself just does whatever I do. I think this has a lot to do that you never feel stressed to the point of frustration that make you like clinch the controller. How they have set up the fights and how you interact with the world feels intuitive and natural to how I want to use my hands. I also didn't stress that much with like clicking around trying to figure out what to press, since there is a guide to the controllers you can use present on the screen almost all the time. Though this do not seem to be active 100% of the time, like when you are diving, but I do wonder if this is just an oversight of the devs part, so hopefully it will be added in the next patch. And when it comes to painful hands, most of us that had this problem know the bad feeling if you need to constantly hold in a button. Which is why I really appreciated that the aiming could be toggled on and off if you want to hold it in, to activate, or just to press a button once. There's small things like this that can make the game feel like the devs have thought about accessibility more than just on the surface level. I do not understand though why the toggle button is not on all the other functions that has you holding in the button, like triggering an emotion or opening your backpack. Yes, we do use the aim more in the game, but when it's already incorporated, I wish for it to be on all toggleable buttons. But one thing that kills my hands even more than holding a button for a long time is to have to mash it. So I was really happy when I saw that the game gave you the option to just hold the button instead of mashing it. I just had this on the whole time as my arms stiffen up if I need to mash anything. Like, I love Mario Party, but that game kills my arms. difficulty settings. Which brings me to the final part of my review, and maybe the most controversial part yet, the difficulty settings. Because we all know that accessibility is not the same as having an easy mode, and to be frank, I did not need this game to have an easy mode, as this already is quite manageable. But what I actually wish for this game to have is a harder difficulty, where you would not regain soul meters without sleeping or eating, the enemies spot you way easier, and it was a bigger consequence for you when you got hurt. This just because it feels it could add a bit more to the replay value. So the game might not have a traditional difficulty settings, but there is sort of a god mode in the game called no failure mode. The game itself says Tchia will never black out even after her stamina is fully depleted. This will make the game significantly easier, but can hinder your experience. Use wisely. So in some way you can look at this as some sort of easy mode if you want to. So to summarize this all up. All in all, I do think that Awaceb did a good job with Tchia. It is noticeable that they have thought about accessibility throughout the whole gameplay, while still being true to their artistic freedom of representing New Caledonia and its culture the way they want. I am impressed to see in the game to think about things like legible font, a journal system, easily available tips, hint and controller information on screen, font size, subtitles, aim assistant, motion sickness, non-button mashing, toggle, the list goes on and on. Accessibility though is a big and vast field, and it is per today impossible to find a game that will be accessible for everyone. The best we can wish for is that the devs are trying and also adapting to feedback that they get, which is what I hope Awaceb will do in this case, as things like the problem of reading the explanation in the setting menu, or that we can get a part in the journal that describes what's have happened in the cutscene, or HUD sizing are things that can be fixed through a patch. To end it all, I will say that it has felt great to have been taking on this journey, as Tchia is a great story I recommend people to experience for themselves. And that is all I had for you today, and remember, this is just my own view of the accessibility looked through the lens of my own illness and disability. And as we all know, no two people with disability are alike, and so will not their accessibility needs be. So if you have been playing the game, do you have anything you want to add to my review? Or maybe does this review make you want to pick up the game? Comment below what you think, and I will see you next time. Bye!